For more than 150 years, science has told us that humans are nothing more than advanced primates, a branch of evolution that began with apes millions of years ago. Fossils, DNA, and ancient tools seem to confirm it. Yet, thousands of years earlier, a very different story was written. A story declaring that man was not born from beasts, but shaped by the hands of God himself. Two origins, two destinies, and only one truth. Are we truly descendants of monkeys, or are we the image of the divine? In the beginning, there was nothing but void. Then a voice, powerful and eternal, spoke light into the darkness. According to the book of Genesis, the universe was not born from chaos, but from command. With every word, order emerged, light and darkness, land and sea, the heavens and the earth. Creation unfolded not over millions of years, but in 6 divine days. On the 6th day, something extraordinary happened. Unlike the stars, the oceans, or even the animals, man was shaped by the very hands of God. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. With those words, humanity was set apart. No longer just another creature, man became the bearer of God's image, endowed with reason, creativity, and a soul. Then, in an act of intimacy that no other being received, the Lord breathed life into dust, and Adam became a living being. The story continues with Eve, fashioned not from earth, but from Adam's own side. Together they embodied unity, companionship, and purpose. In the biblical vision, humanity did not stumble out of evolution, but entered creation fully formed, already destined for relationship with God. To be human was not merely to survive, but to reflect divine glory. This ancient narrative carries profound implications. If true, it means humans are not cousins of primates, but children of the divine. It means life is not an accident, but a deliberate design. It means morality, consciousness, and dignity are not products of biology, but gifts from God. The biblical story does not begin with randomness. It begins with intention. But Genesis is not just an origin tale. For believers across millennia, it is identity. From the Hebrew prophets to early Christians, from the medieval church to modern believers, the creation story anchors human worth. It declares that every life, no matter how small, carries the imprint of the Creator. Yet this very story stands at odds with the narrative of science. The 6 days of creation contrast sharply with the billions of years revealed by geology and cosmology. The sudden appearance of man differs from the long climb of evolution traced through fossils. To skeptics, Genesis is poetry or myth. To believers, it is revelation. And so the question remains, is Genesis history, symbol, or both? Did God truly shape humanity out of dust, or is the story a spiritual truth wrapped in ancient language? These questions fuel one of the greatest conflicts in human thought. But for now, the Genesis account stands as one of the most enduring declarations of who we are, not beasts of the field, but images of the divine. Yet, this very story stands at odds with the narrative of science. The 6 days of creation contrast sharply with the billions of years revealed by geology and cosmology. The sudden appearance of man differs from the long climb of evolution traced through fossils. To skeptics, Genesis is poetry or myth. To believers, it is revelation. But outside the pages of Scripture, buried deep in the earth, lie ancient bones and broken tools. They whisper another story, one written not in sacred text but in stone. And that story begins with fossils. Long before cities and kingdoms, before writing and civilization, humans walked the earth in forms far different from today. Their story is not preserved in Scripture, but in stone, fossils buried beneath layers of time. To scientists, these ancient remains are the silent witnesses of evolution, tracing our journey from ape-like ancestors to modern humanity. The fossil record reveals creatures that were neither fully ape nor fully human. In East Africa, discoveries like Australopithecus afarensis, best known through the skeleton nicknamed Lucy, suggest beings who walked upright over 3 million years ago. With long arms and small brains, they were adapted to both trees and ground, straddling the line between ape and human. Lucy's discovery in 1974 became a cornerstone of evolutionary science, hailed as proof that bipedalism, or upright walking, began long before the brain reached its modern size. Other finds added more chapters to this unfolding story. Homo habilis, known as the handyman, crafted primitive stone tools nearly 2 million years ago. Then came Homo erectus, taller, stronger, and able to harness fire. From caves in Asia to valleys in Africa, fossils show these early humans spreading across continents, adapting to harsh climates, and leaving behind evidence of culture and survival. The scientific timeline stretches across millions of years, from small-brained hominins to Neanderthals, who buried their dead and painted cave walls. Finally, Homo sapiens emerged around 200,000 years ago, carrying the genetic blueprint we share today. To science, we are the last survivors of a vast family tree, the only branch that remains unbroken. But these fossils do more than mark time. They challenge the very core of Genesis. If Lucy walked the Earth 3 million years ago, how can humanity be only 6,000 years old, as some biblical chronologies claim? If Neanderthals and Homo sapiens coexisted, does it mean multiple Adams once lived? These questions unsettle the certainty of a single origin. Yet, fossils are not flawless records. They are fragments, skulls, teeth, bones, incomplete and open to interpretation. Gaps remain. Entire species are inferred from a handful of remains. For critics, this makes evolutionary history a puzzle with missing pieces, sometimes shaped by theory more than fact. Still, with every new discovery, the scientific narrative grows stronger, painting a picture of humanity not created in an instant, but formed through ages of struggle, adaptation, and survival. And so, science declares, we are not dust shaped by divine breath, but descendants of creatures who once lived in trees. But the question lingers. If bones can tell such a story, what about our very blood? Beyond fossils, deep inside every human cell, lies another record of our past, written in DNA. If fossils are the bones of our past, then DNA is the script. Hidden in every cell, this genetic code tells the story of where we came from and who we are. For scientists, DNA is not just evidence. It is proof written in the language of life itself. When the Human Genome Project was completed in 2003, it revealed something extraordinary. The genetic blueprint of modern humans is nearly identical to that of chimpanzees. In fact, over 98% of our DNA matches theirs. To evolutionists, this is no coincidence. It is the signature of a shared ancestry, a family tree not built on faith, but on molecular evidence. But the similarities go deeper. Within our DNA lie fragments called endogenous retroviruses, ancient viral code embedded in our genome, passed down from generation to generation. These genetic scars appear in the same places in both human and ape DNA, suggesting that our ancestors carried them long before the species diverged. For science, this is one of the most compelling arguments for common descent. And yet, DNA also raises profound questions that science alone cannot answer. If we share so much with apes, what makes us different? Why do we write music, build civilizations, and seek meaning beyond survival? A 2% difference may sound small, but in that gap lies the mystery of the human soul. Some theologians argue that genetic similarity does not disprove divine creation. It may simply reflect a common design. Just as an artist reuses brushstrokes across different paintings, a creator might use similar patterns across species. To them, DNA points not to evolution, but to efficiency and elegance in design. Still, the evidence unsettles those who take Genesis literally. If humans share genetic scars with primates, what becomes of the belief that Adam was formed uniquely from dust? If DNA proves descent, where does the soul enter the story? These are not just scientific questions, but spiritual crises. And so the tension deepens. On one hand, DNA speaks with numbers, data, and sequences. On the other, Scripture speaks with prophecy, revelation, and faith. Both claim to tell the truth of human origins, but they cannot both be right in the same way. Yet the debate does not end here. DNA may reveal our physical kinship with animals, but the next frontier asks a question far more explosive. What about time itself? Genesis declares 6 days of creation. Science insists on billions of years, 2 timelines, 2 realities, 1 conflict. And that collision is where our story turns next. From the opening chapter of Genesis, time becomes a sacred rhythm. 6 days of creation, followed by 1 of rest. Light is born, seas divide, land rises, and humanity emerges, all within the span of a single divine week. For believers, this timeline is not just history, but holy ground. Science, however, paints a very different picture. According to geology, astronomy, and paleontology, the Earth is not thousands of years old, but billions. Fossils whisper of strange creatures that lived long before humans. Rocks hold clocks that measure radioactive decay across millions of years, and stars, still shining above, send us light that has traveled across unfathomable distances of time. Here lies one of the greatest conflicts in human thought: 6 days versus millions of years. Can both accounts be true, or must one fall silent? For literalist believers, the choice is clear. Genesis is plain, they argue, and to stretch days into ages is to weaken Scripture itself. If the opening chapter of the Bible is not literal, where does interpretation stop? For them, the defense of 6-day creation is the defense of God's authority. For scientists, the evidence is equally clear. The Grand Canyon's layered walls are not just a marvel of beauty, but a record of deep time carved by rivers over millions of years. Fossilized trilobites, dinosaurs, and mammoths reveal an Earth teeming with life long before humans walked it. Radiometric dating, tested again and again, points not to a young world, but to one unimaginably ancient. Some theologians have tried to bridge the divide. The day-age theory suggests that the days of Genesis represent vast epochs of time, each matching the scientific story of unfolding life. Others propose the gap theory, imagining a vast span between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, a hidden era in which deep time fits. But compromise does not silence the tension. To literalists, these theories feel like surrender. To scientists, they feel like bending evidence to fit faith. And so, the divide remains. This struggle is more than academic. It is about who we are and how we measure our existence. Are we creatures shaped in an instant by divine hands, or products of an ancient universe still unfolding? Time itself has become the battlefield on which faith and science contend. In the mid-19th century, a quiet, observant man began a journey that would shake the very foundations of faith and science. His name was Charles Darwin. Armed with notebooks, curiosity, and a restless mind, Darwin set sail on the HMS Beagle in 1831. The voyage would take him across oceans, through jungles, and onto the remote Galapagos Islands, where a world of strange creatures awaited. There, Darwin encountered finches with beaks of varying shapes, each perfectly adapted to their island's food supply. He observed tortoises whose shells differed from one island to the next. What he saw was not static creation, but variation, adaptation, and survival. Seeds of a dangerous idea began to take root. In 1859, Darwin published On the Origin of Species. His theory of natural selection suggested that life was not fixed, but evolved over vast spans of time. Species survived not because they were created perfect, but because they adapted, changing to fit their environment. Humanity, Darwin implied, was not separate from this process, but deeply entangled within it. The response was explosive. For the scientific community, Darwin's theory offered a framework that explained fossils, biodiversity, and deep time with one elegant principle. For the religious world, it was a challenge to the very heart of Genesis. If humans were not uniquely created but rather descended from other life forms, then what of the claim that we are made in the image of God? Darwin himself wrestled with these questions. Though raised in a Christian home, his discoveries pushed him into spiritual doubt. Yet, he never declared outright atheism. Instead, he left the question of God unresolved, a mystery he could neither prove nor deny. For society, however, the debate was anything but quiet. In pulpits, creation was defended with passion. In lecture halls, evolution was championed as progress. Newspapers caricatured Darwin as an ape, mocking his ideas. But despite the backlash, the theory spread. Over time, it would become the backbone of modern biology, changing medicine, genetics, and our understanding of life itself. Darwin's rise marked a turning point. The conflict was no longer just about days versus ages, but about the very nature of humanity. Are we the children of Eden, handcrafted in an instant, or are we products of natural forces, shaped by struggle and chance across eons? Charles Darwin, a quiet naturalist who once sailed the HMS Beagle across the oceans in search of specimens, shells, and birds. He could not have imagined that his observations on the Galapagos Islands, small finches with different beaks, would ignite a revolution in human thought. For centuries, the dominant view of life's origins had been fixed. Creatures were created exactly as they are now, immutable, perfectly designed. But Darwin's keen eye noticed a troubling pattern. Animals were not fixed. They adapted, they changed, they survived, or they vanished. In his seminal work, On the Origin of Species, published in 1859, Darwin introduced the world to his theory of natural selection. It was elegant, even poetic. Life is not static but dynamic. The strong survive, the weak are eliminated, and across millennia, small changes accumulate into entirely new forms of life. This idea did not stay confined to science journals. It spread like wildfire. To some, it was liberating. Suddenly, the vast diversity of life made sense without appealing to supernatural intervention. To others, it was deeply unsettling. If humans evolved like animals, then what did that mean for the soul, for morality, for the divine order of creation? Darwin himself struggled with the theological implications. Raised in a Christian household, he wrestled with how his discoveries aligned, or clashed, with the book of Genesis. He never called himself an atheist outright, but his writings gave fuel to skeptics who saw in evolution a weapon against the authority of Scripture. Meanwhile, his opponents sharpened their arguments. Clergy denounced the theory as dangerous, even blasphemous. How could humanity, made in the image of God, be reduced to mere animals, cousins to apes? To admit such a thing, they argued, was to deny human dignity. Yet the evidence continued to build. Fossils revealed a story of gradual change. Comparative anatomy showed striking similarities between species. The fossil record whispered of extinction, adaptation, and emergence. Darwin's once radical idea slowly gained traction in universities and scientific circles across Europe and America. But this was more than science. This was identity. If Darwin was correct, then humanity was not the crown jewel of creation, but part of a messy, ongoing process. The shock of this revelation shook Victorian society, where science and faith had long seemed harmonious. And so, a cultural battle began, one that still rages today. Evolution was not just about biology, it was about meaning. Was life guided by divine purpose, or was it driven by blind chance and survival? Darwin lit the spark. The firestorm that followed would change how we see ourselves forever. As Darwin's theory spread, not everyone marveled at the tree of life. For many, it was a direct assault on the very foundations of faith. The book of Genesis was not poetry to them. It was history, a sacred record, and no scientific theory could be allowed to topple it. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a movement began to crystallize: biblical literalism. Its defenders insisted that Genesis must be read word for word without compromise. 6 days meant 6 days. Adam was the first man, made from dust. Eve was formed from his rib. The serpent was real, the garden was real, the flood was real. To them, Darwin's claims were not only wrong, but dangerous. The battle line sharpened in the United States. Preachers warned congregations that evolution undermined morality, the family, and faith in God. Pamphlets were distributed proclaiming the Bible's scientific accuracy. Public lectures denounced Darwin as a deceiver leading souls astray. The movement gained momentum. By the 1920s, the debate erupted in one of the most famous trials in American history, the Scopes monkey trial. A young teacher, John Scopes, was accused of illegally teaching evolution in a Tennessee classroom. The trial became a cultural spectacle: faith versus science, Bible versus biology. Newspapers splashed headlines around the world. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, waving Bibles and chanting hymns. Inside, the arguments went beyond the classroom. Could a teacher mention fossils and evolution without betraying Scripture? Or must education stay bound to the literal words of Genesis? The courtroom became a stage where two worldviews collided. Though Scopes was found guilty, the larger battle was far from over. Creationist resistance dug in deeper. Bible institutes, radio programs, and later television evangelists carried the message: Darwin was wrong. The Bible was right. Period. What drove this response was not simply a rejection of science. It was about identity. If humans came from apes, what happened to the belief that humanity was created in God's image? If Genesis was metaphor, what happened to its authority? To give ground on creation, many feared, was to give ground on everything: the fall, sin, salvation, even Christ himself. The literalist response was more than intellectual disagreement. It was cultural resistance. It was a shield against modernity, a defense against a world that seemed to be moving away from God. And so, two narratives now stood face to face: Darwin's slow, natural process versus Genesis' immediate, divine act. Both claimed to explain human origins. Both demanded loyalty. The question was no longer confined to lecture halls or church pews. It was spilling into politics, schools, and the heart of public life. For centuries, human beings have asked a single, haunting question: who are we? The debate over evolution and creation is not just about bones in the ground or words on a page. It is about identity, our place in the cosmos, our relationship with God, and our sense of worth. Science, armed with fossils, genetics, and cosmology, insists we are products of natural history. We are one species among many, molded by time, chance, and survival. Our DNA links us to apes, and through them, to the vast web of life stretching back billions of years. From this perspective, humanity is extraordinary, not because we were separately created, but because we are a self-aware branch of nature. Faith, on the other hand, reminds us that we are not accidents. According to Scripture, humanity is distinct, set apart as bearers of the Imago Dei, the image of God. We are not merely advanced primates, we are spiritual beings with eternal purpose. To reduce us to biology alone, believers argue, is to strip away the very soul of what it means to be human. This tension has often been more than intellectual. It has been deeply personal. To accept evolution, some Christians fear, is to unravel the thread of salvation itself. If Adam and Eve were not historical, how did sin enter the world? And if there was no fall, why would humanity need redemption through Christ? For many, the stakes could not be higher. On the other side, scientists wrestle with their own unease. If humans are simply designed by a creator, where does that leave scientific inquiry? Does faith demand blind obedience, or can it coexist with the evidence of geology and genetics? These questions do not sit comfortably in textbooks. They echo in lecture halls, pulpits, and kitchen table conversations alike. The clash is visible in culture. School boards debate whether to teach evolution, creation, or both. Families find themselves divided. Some embrace science but lose faith. Others cling to faith but reject science. A few attempt a bridge, insisting that God could use evolution as his method of creation. But for billions of people, this is not merely a debate. It is a struggle for meaning. Are we children of dust, shaped by divine hands, or children of chance, sculpted by natural forces? Do we belong to heaven, or to the earth alone? And yet this struggle, faith versus science, soul versus DNA, is far from over. The story takes a new turn when evidence emerges that forces both sides to reconsider. In 1974, under the burning Ethiopian sun, a team of paleoanthropologists stumbled upon fragments of bone jutting out of the earth. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable. But as the pieces were carefully lifted from the soil, a skeleton began to take shape. She was small, barely 3.5 feet tall. Her skull was ape-like, yet her pelvis and legs hinted at something astonishing. She walked upright. She was named Lucy, after the Beatles' song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which played in the camp that night. And with her discovery, the debate over human origins took on a new urgency. Lucy belonged to a species now called Australopithecus afarensis. She lived more than 3 million years ago. Though not human, she was no ordinary ape. Her curved fingers and long arms suggested she still climbed trees, yet her hips and knees revealed that she walked bipedally across the African plains. For the first time, scientists had hard evidence of a creature that seemed to bridge the gap between ape and human. For many, Lucy was a revelation. The fossil record, long criticized as incomplete, now had a face, one that forced the world to rethink human history. Evolution was no longer just an abstract theory or a set of sketches in Darwin's notebook. It was flesh and bone. But not everyone was convinced. To creationists, Lucy was simply another ape, misclassified to fit a theory. Some argued her bones were too fragmentary to draw conclusions. Others insisted she was a chimpanzee or a gorilla, nothing more. The debate grew louder, echoing across lecture halls and church pulpits. Yet Lucy was not alone. Over the decades, more fossils emerged. Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and others, each adding new layers to the story of human evolution. Taken together, they painted a picture of gradual change, a long, branching journey from primitive ancestors to modern Homo sapiens. Still, fossils alone could not answer everything. They told us about bones and movement, but not about the deeper mystery. What made us truly human? Was it intelligence, language, culture, or something less tangible? The soul. As scientists pondered, technology opened another door. Beyond bones, there was another kind of record, one written inside every human cell. DNA, the genetic code of life, promised answers the fossil record could not. If fossils revealed the shape of our past, DNA revealed the script that wrote it. In the late 20th century, a new frontier opened, the mapping of the human genome, the complete set of genetic instructions inside our cells. What scientists found astonished the world. More than 98% of our DNA is identical to that of chimpanzees. To many, this was confirmation. Humans and apes share a common ancestor. But the story ran even deeper. Scattered throughout our DNA are endogenous retroviruses, ancient viral insertions that act like genetic fossils. They appear in the exact same locations in both human and chimp genomes, evidence, scientists argue, of a shared lineage stretching back millions of years. Perhaps the most striking discovery came in the form of chromosome 2. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, while chimpanzees and other great apes have 24. For decades, this puzzled researchers, but under the microscope, the mystery unraveled. Human chromosome 2 is a fusion of two ancestral ape chromosomes, joined end to end. At the site of the fusion, remnants of telomeres and a second, unused centromere lie dormant, biological fingerprints of our evolutionary history. To evolutionary biologists, this was not just compelling, it was overwhelming. The fusion could not be coincidence. It was a genetic marker written into every human cell, linking us to our primate cousins. But once again, faith wrestled with the implications. If our DNA bears the marks of an evolutionary past, what does this mean for the biblical account of Adam and Eve? Could divine creation include such a process? Or was this genetic evidence another challenge to the authority of Scripture? Some Christians embraced the findings, suggesting that God used evolution as his tool, weaving humanity through natural processes while still imbuing us with his image. Others rejected the science outright, insisting the similarities were designed by God, not inherited from common ancestors. In this view, shared DNA was evidence of a common designer, not common descent. The debate did not stop in laboratories or churches. It spilled into classrooms, textbooks, and even courtrooms, shaping how societies taught their children about human origins. Yet whether accepted or denied, the evidence remained, written not in ancient scrolls or dusty bones, but in the living code inside each of us. The double helix carried a message, one that forced both science and faith to face difficult questions. Still, DNA could not speak to everything. It could explain the physical, but what about the spiritual? Could a genome account for morality, consciousness, or the yearning for God? Or was there more to humanity than biology could ever reveal? As science advanced, the Church faced a pressing question. Should faith dig in and resist, or could theology adapt? For centuries, Genesis had been read as straightforward history. But as fossils and DNA uncovered new layers of the human story, cracks appeared in the wall of literal interpretation. Some theologians began to ask, what if the text of Scripture was never meant to be a scientific manual? This gave rise to theistic evolution, the belief that God is both creator and the author of evolution. In this view, the unfolding of life over billions of years is not a challenge to faith, but a testimony to divine wisdom. The grandeur of creation lies not in a sudden act, but in the elegance of a process guided by God's hand. The idea was not without controversy, but it began gaining traction in seminaries and churches. Some Christian scholars argued that the Genesis story was theological, not literal, meant to reveal truths about God and humanity, not biology or geology. Adam and Eve could be understood as archetypes, representing humankind's spiritual fall, rather than as the literal first couple. Even the Catholic Church, long perceived as resistant to science, began to speak with nuance. In 1950, Pope Pius XII acknowledged in Humani Generis that evolution was a serious scientific theory worth study, though he insisted the soul was directly created by God. Decades later, Pope John Paul II went further, declaring evolution to be more than a hypothesis. And in 2009, Pope Benedict XVI spoke of the compatibility of faith and science, urging believers not to see them as rivals but as partners in seeking truth. Protestant responses varied widely. Some evangelical circles remained firmly creationist, teaching a young earth and rejecting evolution outright. Yet others, particularly within mainline denominations, embraced theistic evolution, seeing no contradiction between Genesis and Darwin. For them, the Bible spoke to why we exist, while science described how. But this shift came at a cost. To literalists, it felt like betrayal, an erosion of biblical authority in favor of secular science. To progressives, it felt like liberation, faith released from the need to deny evidence. The divide widened, not only between science and faith, but within the church itself. Still, the idea of theistic evolution offered a bridge, a way to affirm both the discoveries of science and the truths of Scripture. It invited believers to see God not as threatened by evolution, but as its very author. And yet the debate was not finished. If Genesis was symbolic, how far could reinterpretation go? Could the text bend without breaking? And what would become of doctrines built upon Adam, Eve, and the fall? For millennia, the book of Genesis stood as the foundation of humanity's story. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. These words framed our origins, our purpose, and our destiny. But as science pressed forward, the church and the faithful were confronted with a difficult question. Should Genesis be read as literal history or as profound symbolism? The literal reading is simple. 6 days meant 6 days. Adam and Eve were real individuals, the parents of all humankind. The serpent was a true tempter, and the Garden of Eden a physical paradise. This interpretation grounds the doctrines of sin and redemption, giving Christianity its narrative of the fall and the need for salvation. For many, to surrender this view is to unravel the very logic of the gospel itself. Yet others argue that Scripture speaks in a language richer than literalism. Ancient Near Eastern cultures, they point out, wrote creation stories not to detail science but to convey meaning. Genesis, then, may not be competing with modern biology. Instead, it may be proclaiming timeless truths about God, creation, and humanity's relationship with the divine. Some theologians view Adam and Eve as archetypes, symbolic representatives of humankind. The garden becomes a metaphor for innocence, the fall a symbol of the universal human tendency toward disobedience. In this light, the story transcends history. It becomes a mirror of every soul's journey. This interpretation finds resonance with believers who wish to honor both Scripture and science. Evolution may explain the mechanism of human origins, while Genesis explains the meaning. Science can tell us how we came to be, but faith tells us why. But this symbolic approach raises its own tensions. If Adam and Eve were not historical, what does that mean for the doctrine of original sin? If there was no literal fall, why would humanity need redemption through Christ? These questions divide theologians, pastors, and congregations even today. For many believers, this debate is not abstract. It is deeply personal. To read Genesis as myth or symbol can feel like losing the anchor of certainty, while to read it literally can feel like rejecting reason itself. Families, churches, even entire denominations wrestle with these choices. The result is a spectrum of belief. On one end, staunch literalists who see compromise as heresy. On the other, progressive theologians who embrace metaphor. And in between, countless believers navigating a fragile balance, trying to hold faith and science together without tearing either apart. And so, Genesis remains both ancient text and living question, a story still speaking, still shaping, still dividing. As science uncovers the history written in bones and DNA, and theology reinterprets the timeless words of Genesis, the question becomes personal. What do you believe? Are humans the product of millions of years of evolution, or were we created in the image of God? Take a moment to reflect. Your perspective matters, not just in this debate, but in how you understand your own place in the universe. Is faith enough to answer the mystery of our origins, or does science hold the key? Join the conversation. Comment below with your thoughts. Share your perspective on faith, science, and what it means to be human. Every voice adds to the story. Because this is more than history, more than theory, it's a question that touches the very core of identity. With this question hanging in the air, we now arrive at the heart of the debate, the climax where science and scripture collide, and the meaning of humanity is examined like never before. The debate over human origins reaches its peak. For centuries, two narratives have sought to explain our existence. On one side, science presents a meticulous record of fossils, genetic sequences, and evolutionary patterns spanning millions of years. On the other, Scripture asserts that humans were created in the image of God, unique, purposeful, and endowed with a soul. Today, these worldviews collide, forcing a confrontation that is both intellectual and existential. Science offers compelling evidence. Fossils of hominins like Lucy reveal an upright walking ancestor over 3 million years ago. DNA comparisons show striking similarities between humans and other primates, highlighting shared ancestry. Endogenous retroviruses, viral remnants in our genome, act as molecular fossils, marking evolution's timeline. Chromosome 2, with its unique fusion, directly connects humans to great apes. Evolution, it seems, is embedded in the very blueprint of life. Yet Scripture challenges this narrative with profound questions of meaning and purpose. Humans are more than their biology. The image of God imprinted on humanity represents consciousness, moral awareness, and relational capacity. Adam and Eve, whether literal or symbolic, illustrate the origin of free will, ethical choice, and spiritual responsibility. Faith reminds us that science can explain how we came to be, but not why. The confrontation extends beyond facts. It is deeply personal. Individuals, families, educators, and faith communities grapple with identity. Are we defined by DNA, fossils, and evolutionary history, or by morality, conscience, and divine image? Can science and faith coexist, or must one claim supremacy? This tension permeates classrooms, laboratories, and pulpits, shaping beliefs, ethics, and the understanding of what it means to be human. Amid this clash emerges possibility. The concept of theistic evolution bridges the divide, proposing that God works through natural processes. Evolution accounts for the mechanics of life, while faith addresses the questions of purpose, morality, and transcendence. Humanity, then, is both a product of nature and a reflection of the divine. The struggle is not to choose one perspective, but to understand how both illuminate different dimensions of existence. This is the apex of the documentary journey. Fossils meet scripture, DNA meets divine intent, and human identity hangs in the balance. The confrontation does not yield a simple answer, but it compels reflection. How do we reconcile our biological past with our spiritual purpose? How do we live with this tension without denying either side? The viewer is left at the crossroads of evidence and belief, invited to ponder their own understanding of humanity's origin and purpose. The stage is set for the next segment, the human dilemma, where soul and DNA, faith and biology confront the very essence of what it means to be human. The confrontation has reached its peak, but the human dilemma remains unresolved. How can we reconcile our biological origins with our spiritual essence? The answer lies ahead. Humanity stands at a profound crossroads. After centuries of inquiry, discovery, and debate, we are confronted with a question that touches every dimension of existence. What defines a human being? Are we merely biological creatures, shaped by the slow march of evolution, or are we spiritual entities, created in the image of God with purpose, morality, and a soul? This tension between DNA and divinity is the essence of the human dilemma. Science tells a compelling story. Every cell in our bodies carries DNA, the molecular code recording millions of years of evolutionary history. Fossils trace our lineage to early hominins, revealing a gradual journey from bipedal primates to fully modern humans. Chromosome 2, fused uniquely in our genome, provides clear evidence of our connection to great apes. Endogenous retroviruses embedded in our DNA act as molecular fossils, recording ancient viral infections that were preserved across generations. These tangible markers of ancestry leave little doubt that humans are the product of natural processes shaped by mutation, adaptation, and survival over vast timescales. Yet science, precise and meticulous, cannot fully answer the deeper question: why do we exist? Faith offers a complementary perspective. Humanity is described in Scripture as created in the image of God, bearing a reflection of divine purpose. Adam and Eve, whether literal individuals or archetypal figures, illustrate the origin of moral awareness, free will, and spiritual responsibility. The soul, consciousness, and capacity for ethical decision-making distinguish humans from all other creatures. We are more than matter. We are meaning, morality, and relationship with the divine. The tension emerges when these truths collide. Evolution explains how we exist, tracing the biological mechanisms of life. Scripture explores why we exist, illuminating purpose, conscience, and the human capacity for transcendence. Individuals feel this conflict daily, students wrestling with biology lessons, families questioning spiritual identity, and believers confronting moral and existential questions. Are our choices dictated solely by biology, or is there a moral compass guiding our actions? Can consciousness, creativity, and love be fully explained through evolution, or do they point to something beyond nature? Philosophers, theologians, and scientists have sought integration. Theistic evolution suggests God works through natural processes, merging biological evolution with divine intention. Humanity then exists as both organism and image-bearer. This duality is not contradictory but complementary, offering a richer, more nuanced understanding of what it means to be human. The human dilemma does not have a simple resolution. Instead, it challenges viewers to reflect, question, and explore. It is a tension that fuels curiosity, shapes morality, and inspires the search for meaning. Biology and spirituality, DNA and soul, coexist in a delicate balance that defines every human life. The dilemma persists. Yet in the aftermath of centuries of discovery and debate, how do humanity, science, and faith coexist? The next chapter seeks to answer this. In the wake of centuries of debate, humanity stands at a unique intersection of knowledge and belief. Science has advanced at a remarkable pace, providing unprecedented insight into the origins, structure, and evolution of life. Fossils, DNA analysis, and genetic sequencing have offered a precise, measurable account of human ancestry, revealing the deep connections between all life forms. Meanwhile, faith continues to shape millions of lives, offering purpose, moral guidance, and a vision of existence that transcends the physical world. Today, the challenge is not to dismiss one or the other, but to navigate the space where science and faith meet. Modern science presents a detailed narrative of human evolution. Fossil discoveries, from Australopithecus afarensis to Homo sapiens, provide a timeline spanning millions of years. Genetic studies reveal that humans share nearly 98% of DNA with chimpanzees. Endogenous retroviruses embedded in our genome act as molecular timestamps, marking evolutionary events. These tangible data points are no longer confined to academic debate. They influence education, public understanding, and even social policy. Humans are undeniably part of the natural world, products of processes stretching back eons. Faith offers a complementary perspective. Churches, religious communities, and spiritual leaders emphasize that humans are more than their biology. Scripture describes humanity as created in God's image, endowed with purpose, consciousness, and moral responsibility. Adam and Eve, whether literal figures or symbolic representations, serve as anchors for understanding human nature, ethics, and the relationship between humanity and the divine. Faith addresses questions that science cannot fully answer. Why do we exist? What is the purpose of morality? How should we live? The coexistence of these perspectives has evolved. Many religious traditions now embrace the concept of theistic evolution, recognizing that natural processes may be God's chosen method for creating life. Dialogues between scientists and theologians have increased, highlighting areas of complementarity rather than conflict. The relationship is not always seamless. Literalist interpretations of Scripture continue to challenge evolutionary theory in educational and cultural contexts. Nevertheless, a growing movement seeks integration, emphasizing that science explains mechanisms while faith provides meaning. This dual perspective affects society profoundly. Education systems grapple with how to present human origins. Families negotiate spiritual and scientific teaching. Policymakers consider the implications of both knowledge and belief. The interplay between empirical evidence and spiritual understanding shapes our sense of identity, ethics, and community. Humans must learn to navigate a world where the tangible and the transcendent coexist. As we look around the modern world, the dialogue continues. Laboratories and cathedrals, lecture halls and churches all contribute to a richer understanding of humanity. We are biological beings, spiritual beings, and creatures capable of reflection. Understanding our origins requires both science and faith, each illuminating aspects of the human story that the other cannot fully capture. The conversation continues. Can science and faith truly find common ground, or are divides too deep to bridge? The next segment explores the possibilities and the challenges of dialogue. In the modern era, the dialogue between science and faith has shifted from confrontation to conversation, but it remains complex. Humanity has long wrestled with questions about existence, purpose, and meaning. Science explains how we came to be. Fossils trace our evolutionary history. DNA reveals shared ancestry with other species, and genetics maps the intricate code of life. Faith, on the other hand, asks why. Why we exist, what our purpose is, and how we should live in a world that is both magnificent and mysterious. The intersection of these perspectives is where understanding deepens, but it is also where tension persists. Scholars, theologians, and scientists now engage in ongoing discussions aimed at bridging the divide. Theistic evolution, a perspective embraced by many religious thinkers, proposes that God works through natural processes to shape life. Evolution explains the mechanics of human development, while faith imbues life with meaning and purpose. This approach allows individuals to accept scientific evidence without abandoning spiritual beliefs. Conversely, secular thinkers recognize that religion influences behavior, ethics, and community cohesion, highlighting that empirical observation alone cannot account for morality, creativity, and human conscience. Despite these efforts, divisions remain. Literalist interpretations of Scripture continue to challenge scientific findings in educational and cultural contexts. Some scientists worry that integrating faith with science may compromise critical thinking or empirical rigor. In certain regions, political and social debates amplify these divides, influencing curricula, public policy, and societal attitudes. Yet these challenges also provide an opportunity. By engaging in dialogue rather than conflict, communities can explore the nuances of human identity without oversimplifying complex questions. Bridges emerge when shared goals are emphasized. Both science and faith seek truth, understanding, and meaning. Science reveals the remarkable complexity of life, from the molecular structure of DNA to the vastness of the cosmos. Faith reflects on the significance of that complexity within a moral and spiritual framework, offering guidance on how to live well. Together, They encourage humans to explore existence as both observers and participants, combining empirical inquiry with ethical and spiritual reflection. Education and communication are crucial. Schools, families, and faith communities play a pivotal role in guiding the next generation to appreciate the insights of both domains. By fostering critical thinking, ethical reasoning, and open dialogue, society encourages a balanced understanding of humanity. Scientists and religious leaders collaborating in dialogue exemplify the potential of coexistence. Ultimately, this ongoing conversation demonstrates that science and faith need not compete for dominance. They illuminate different aspects of the same human experience. Where evolution explains biology, faith explains purpose. Where scripture informs morality, science informs mechanism. Both are essential to understanding ourselves fully. The dialogue continues, but fundamental questions remain. Beyond biology and belief, what truly defines humanity? The answer awaits. After centuries of inquiry, discovery, and dialogue, humanity faces its most profound question. What does it truly mean to be human? Science has revealed the mechanics of life, from DNA sequences to fossil records. Evolutionary biology traces our lineage through millions of years, demonstrating our shared ancestry with other species. Every cell carries the code of our past, each gene a fragment of history. We are shaped by time, mutation, and adaptation, a product of natural forces that have sculpted life over eons. Yet these discoveries, as remarkable as they are, only describe how we exist. Faith addresses the deeper dimensions of our existence: purpose, morality, and spiritual identity. Scripture presents humanity as created in the image of God, endowed with consciousness, ethical discernment, and the capacity for relationship with the divine. Adam and Eve, whether literal figures or symbolic archetypes, represent the emergence of self-awareness, choice, and responsibility. The soul, a concept central to faith, transcends biology. It is the element that allows humans to ask questions, seek meaning, create art, experience love, and aspire beyond survival. The human experience is defined by this intersection of biology and spirit. Our bodies are formed by evolution. Our minds and souls seek truth, beauty, and moral understanding. Creativity, empathy, and conscience cannot be fully reduced to chemical reactions or genetic sequences. Science explains the framework of our physical existence, but faith illuminates the purpose behind it. Humans are both material and immaterial, temporal and eternal, a paradox that challenges comprehension and invites reflection. This duality is evident in daily life. Ethics, culture, law, and personal decisions are informed by both empirical knowledge and moral principles. Humanity wrestles with choices that extend beyond survival, acts of compassion, self-sacrifice, and justice. These dimensions of existence demonstrate that being human is not solely about adaptation or reproduction. It is about seeking meaning, connecting with others, and striving toward ideals that surpass the material. The final question, therefore, is not simply philosophical, it is practical and existential. It asks how we should live, how we relate to one another, and how we understand our place in a universe governed by both natural laws and spiritual meaning. The dialogue between science and faith enriches this understanding, offering complementary perspectives rather than opposing forces. Together, they provide a fuller picture of human nature, our origins, our purpose, and our potential. As viewers reflect on this question, the message is clear. Humanity cannot be defined by biology alone, nor by faith alone. We exist in the tension between DNA and divinity, evolution and morality, mechanism and meaning. To be human is to navigate this tension with awareness, responsibility, and curiosity. The ultimate answer may remain elusive, but the search itself defines us. In the final reflection, we consider humanity's journey through evidence, belief, and the enduring quest for meaning. As the journey through human origins, science, and faith concludes, one truth emerges. The search for meaning is as defining as our biology. From the fossil record to the strands of DNA, science provides clarity about our physical origins. Yet, from scripture to centuries of spiritual reflection, faith offers insight into purpose, morality, and destiny. Neither alone can fully capture the depth of human existence. It is in the convergence of these perspectives that humanity finds its richest understanding. Throughout history, humans have sought to explain themselves. Ancient scriptures described creation with care, illustrating purpose, order, and divine intention. Genesis recounts humanity's formation as unique, set apart, and endowed with moral responsibility. In parallel, scientific discovery has traced our biological development over millions of years, from early hominins to Homo sapiens. Fossils, chromosomes, and genetic markers testify to an intricate evolutionary tapestry, revealing both connections to other life forms and the extraordinary complexity of our species. Reconciling these narratives is no simple task. Faith asks us to consider soul, meaning, and divine intention. Science challenges us to account for evidence, adaptation, and empirical reasoning. Yet rather than contradiction, these approaches can complement one another. Understanding the mechanics of our bodies deepens appreciation for their design. Acknowledging purpose and consciousness enriches the implications of biology. Humans exist not solely as products of evolution, nor solely as spiritual beings. They are both. Modern dialogue between scientists, theologians, educators, and thinkers illustrates this integration. Theistic evolution, interdisciplinary studies, and moral philosophy explore ways to honor evidence while embracing faith. Ethical reasoning, empathy, creativity, and reflection emerge as common ground, revealing that being human involves curiosity, responsibility, and intentionality. Both domains illuminate facets of identity that the other cannot fully explain. The implications extend beyond theory. How we teach, lead, create, and govern is informed by this balance. Recognizing the tension between biology and spirituality encourages humility, dialogue, and openness. It reminds us that being human is more than survival or adaptation. It is a continuous journey of seeking, learning, and reflecting. This awareness can foster compassion, understanding, and shared purpose across cultures, communities, and generations. As the documentary closes, viewers are invited to reflect on their own perspective. Are you defined by DNA alone, by faith alone, or by the interplay of both? The answer may vary, but the pursuit of understanding is universal. This is the essence of being human, exploring origins, questioning purpose, and striving to live with awareness of both the natural and the spiritual. Thank you for exploring the journey of humanity with us. If you found this thought-provoking, give this video a like, subscribe to join our community, and tap the notification bell so you won't miss our future explorations. Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your perspective on what it truly means to be human. And don't forget to share this video with friends and family to continue the conversation. Your journey of discovery starts here.